I feel like we need to play.
We need to play some Round the Twist music, without a doubt. Have you ever felt like this? How strange things happen. Are you going round the twist? That's how it was.
I did not help with that at all. It was all you.
I loved it.
Hi, Kate.
Hi, Dom. How do you do?
I'm doing pretty well. I had a great day today, but I'm also very excited to wind down with a glass of wine and listen to a fabulous story. How are you?
Yay! You can wind down. I'm really well, thank you. That's a flat out lie. I feel like I'm coming down with something, and there's a lot of ill people at my workplace and such, and I really need to stop making out with people and whatnot. Maybe that's part of it, but not at work.
Not at work, yes.
Outside of work. But at the same time, I think I might be coming down with something. Hopefully it's just, in my mind. You'll get why I said that, surely. But yeah.
Teaser.
But otherwise, exceptional. I have a massive episode today to share with lots of little stories in it. So I'm very excited to share it. But Dominic, do we have any housekeeping? Oh, I liked that. That was very James Bond theme song-esque.
Yeah, I was actually trying to channel a bit of, what's her name?
Shirley,
yeah.
Shirley Bassett? No. Bassie, thank you. She's not a dog breed. She's a singer.
And she's not Angela Bassett did the thing.
Angela Bassett did the thing.
But yes, our pretty much stock standard housekeeping is please go check out all of our amazing social channels at shitting.bricks.podcast. And while you're at it, go become one of our brickies on Patreon because Kate and I are delivering extra bonus episodes on the weekly.
Oh, damn.
So
how exciting.
You're missing out if you're not one of our brickies. And you're putting a few extra coins in our pocket to keep the lights on. So
that's right.
Give it a crack.
Please do.
And guess what? Funnily enough, it's shitting.bricks.podcast.
Ooh, that's rare.
So you can find it pretty easily on Patreon. Or it's
so true.
Links on our socials as well. And if you've got any beef with Kate or I, or you've got a story that you want us to tell, why not email us
Yeah,
we're open to suggestions.
Definitely.
You may or may not be as good a storyteller as we are, but we'll put you to the test.
That's right.
So just email us at shitting.bricks.podcast@gmail.com.
Do it now. Amazing.
Okay. And one last thing, we have got our BooPod Network feature podcast this week so last week we did like the OG BooPod Network founder, Steve.
Hi, Steve.
From Haunted UK podcast. But this week we're going to do Horror Roulette with Nick and Em, who were in fact the first ever podcast that we ever connected with and did like a little cross promotion. So
amazing. Hey, Nick and Em.
Yeah, we love Nick and Em, brother and sister, they're brother and sister. And
they are now.
And each week they do they use an online appy roulette game thing and they pick a random word and then they each have to tell a story based off of that word. It's hilariously simple but also awesome idea. So
I love it.
Yeah, very much like Kate and I. So go check them out.
Yes, do it.
And
Dom.
I almost forgot. Sorry,
yes,
Kate.
Go.
One more thing.
Okay.
Please don't forget to go rate and review us. It's the year of rating and reviews. We're still not getting the ones that we were expecting. In fact, we haven't gotten any since we started reminding you at the start of this year.
What? Oh, my God. People don't know how to
folks,
use their phones.
You're not listening. Please go give us a 5-star review. We told you.
Yeah.
Again.
Do it. Very quick. Very easy.
Okay. 4:42. All you, Kate. That's the end of housekeeping.
Thank you, Dom. And that is perfect timing because as I said at the top of this episode, this is a This is a big one, and I even cut out stories. So, this could potentially be something I revisit later on down the track. But today, I am going to talk to you and our listeners about the brain.
The brain?
The brain.
The
Now, I looked
brain.
up, I usually like to do a phobia at the start of my episode. Believe it or not, anything, if you're looking like phobias about the brain or phobias of the brain, everything goes into how phobias are created in the brain. So it's not
Yeah.
so much the brain, but it explains a little bit about how they work. And I don't think that I've done a real kind of description of that. So I'm going to hit you with that today because it's all about the brain. So, when we're talking about our episodes, we talk about scary things. So, when I went on to have a look up some phobias, how they're created, yada, 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 it explains that fear is an emotion of anticipation that is triggered when a situation that is at risk for our safety and or the safety of others is perceived.
Perceived.
Perceived
Perceived.
through either. Now, this is from a scientific journal, so I'm going to hit you with some big words. I'm very excited, and I'm going to pretend like I know what they all mean and how to say them all. So,
Educate us.
risk of our safety or the safety of others is perceived through either uh, oh, wow, I fucked the first one. Okay. Exteroceptive inputs or the endocrine and autonomic nervous systems. To prepare the body to face this danger, these stimuli can evoke our freeze, flight, fight, fright, fuck reactions. Or, I don't believe that last one is actually on the list, folks, but you never know in the big city. Or tend and befriend responses, such as turning to others for help or social support, or making a situation less tense, dangerous, or uncomfortable in some way. At the neurobiological level, I know you were worried about that. Significant advances have been made in identifying fear circuits and mechanisms. Dysfunctions in these circuits or mechanisms can lead to chronic psychiatric disorders, including post traumatic stress disorder and various types of phobia, including specific phobias, which we have talked many, many about. Indeed, available treatments that aim to reduce pathological fear are associated with decreased symptom severity, but up to 40% of patients show only partial long-term benefit, while most of them fail to achieve complete remission. So if you get treated for something, it might get better, but it'll never go away entirely, is what I took from that.
The brain.
Specific phobias are extreme and persistent fears of certain objects, situations, activities, or people. Additionally, people who suffer from specific phobias work hard to avoid their phobia stimuli, even though they know that there is no threat or danger, but they feel powerless to stop their irrational fears. Dogs, heights, tunnels, darkness, water, flying, and injuries involving blood are a few of the more common irrational fears. We have gone into some of the more uncommon ones. However, all of those I think we've pretty much covered up to date. While PTSD is always caused by a traumatic event, specific phobia can result from either a traumatic event or not. So there's, different forms.
Mm.
So that's a little bit of a scientific roundhouse kick to the noggin about fears, phobias, those sorts of things.
Yeah, and like all through our episodes, we always touch upon a little bit on the specific, like psychological, context of specific fears and where they may originate from and why and blah, blah, blah. So thanks, Kate.
Hey, no worries. Do you know what? I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to get into some of the weird things that your brain does. And I really enjoyed reading about these. It's very much everybody's had this. Everybody's had this. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more in detail about some of the weird shit that your brain does. Now, your brain, our brains have incredible processing power and storage capacity. It can handle a huge amount of sensory input at once, and it not only makes us who we are, but it keeps us going. Unfortunately, it's not entirely perfect. It is full of technical glitches, storage issues, and not one little bit of confusion, but that can lead to some pretty weird stuff. Some of it is weird that we haven't wanted to admit that it's happening for a very long time. Fortunately, though, I'm going to talk to you about a couple of weird, wonderful things that our brains do. The first one that I want to talk to you about is autonomous sensory meridian response, otherwise known as ASMR.
Oh my
Now,
gosh.
this is something that's really hit the pop culture, the zeitgeist in the past 12, 18 months, in my opinion. ASMR, you would have heard about it. People on the internet, crunching things and talking sexily into microphones and whatnot.
Yeah, Kate, there's people that make more money
Yeah,
than you and I do from both of our jobs
yeah,
and the little money we make from this podcast combined. Times it by
correct.
10. There's people literally making so much money off of ASMR.
Now here you go. Here's an interesting thing about that. It's only something that only certain people experience. So not
Mm.
everybody gets a benefit from ASMR, but for these lucky people, certain triggers create what they describe as a sort of overwhelmingly pleasant tingling sensation that settles into the back of their head or neck. Now, what causes this? There is not really any idea as to why. There was a study done in 2018 which found that ASMR can produce some mental and physical health benefits, but it didn't find any smoking guns. There hasn't been much research done on the phenomenon. I'm sure that there's going to be more. And one of the only real scientific studies out there is from Swansea University, examining the experiences of 500 people sensitive to ASMR. While they didn't even start to get into what's going on as far as brain activity in ASMR sensitive people, they did find that for most of the people surveyed, it was whispering that really did the trick and it kickstarted the head tingles. Deliberate movements was another big one. So there are a bunch. I'm trying to whisper, but I don't know how low I can whisper into my microphone for it still to be picked up. So I don't think I'm going to be taking off in my ASMR in my
I think
career
it's
anytime
about
soon.
how much effort you put into the
Oh,
words.
I see. So it's more of a breathy kind of thing. I see.
Okay, Kate and I are going to have a shitting brick sex line.
Ah, yes, I'm down with that. I think that'll work really well on my resume, right next to classroom teacher. Now, there's a whole bunch of videos on YouTube where whispering people pretend to give you a haircut while people watch them. Now, that's to
Oh,
relax.
yeah.
Now, we don't know a whole lot about ASMR. There wasn't even a term for it until when do you think the term was created, Dom? What year?
2016.
2010. So you weren't too far off, but there wasn't even a term until 2010. So it's not long ago. Now, not entirely surprising because even now, those who experience it have a tough time explaining it to those that don't. Even harder is explaining. I really like the articles I took from this particular website because it's very sassy. Even harder is explaining why you're sitting in the dark listening to a woman whispering at you, waiting for something a lot of people called head orgasms.
I look, Kate, I don't subscribe to ASMR stuff on the
Yep.
regular,
Yep.
but I can enjoy it. Like I'm interested whenever I come across it in like TikToks and other
Yeah.
recordings and things. I'm like, this isn't unpleasant, whereas Jessica Taranto, it's torture.
Yeah, yeah, no, I hear that. And to be honest, in terms of ASMR, I haven't really engaged in much of that. But I will tell you that if somebody whispered in my ear, I I would collapse at the knees. That have a
Oh,
huge
thing.
physical response to someone whispering in my ear, which sometimes makes work meetings challenging because if someone needs to speak to you and they're sitting next to you and then they're just like, why are they talking about curriculum again? I'm like, stop
Kate's on the
it.
floor.
Kate's melted out of her chair again, guys. Someone pick her up. No, I can control it most of the time, but don't whisper in my ear if you're near me. That's just all I'll say. Okay, so that's ASMR. The next brain fuckery I want to talk to you about. I'm very sweary today, aren't I? I think
Not
that's about
really.
that's the fourth swear I might have dropped. Apologies to anyone listening who's offended by foul language.
Last
I'll
week
keep
when
doing
I
it.
was doing the dentist episode,
Yeah,
was it the dentist? Oh, whichever episode it was. No, it was a different one last week. But anyway,
mice, the mice one.
mice.
Yeah.
I swore, I think, about 30 times within 5 minutes about my dental trauma.
Yeah,
So
but
yeah,
fair enough
okay.
because you were frustrated about it. I could sense that.
I was, and I'm still not vaping, folks. Just letting you know.
Yay! Okay, the next one I want to talk to you about, Dominic, is the doorway effect. The doorway effect. Now, the doorway effect is, have you ever walked into another room and completely forgot why you were there? You are not alone and you're probably not going insane. Very sassy. You're just the victim of what's called the doorway effect. Researchers from the University of Notre Dame set up an experiment just to see how walking from one room to another in a controlled environment actually impacted memory. The tests were done both in a virtual setting and a real life one. Participants were asked to walk into a room and pick up an item. In the game, it disappeared into a virtual backpack, while in real life, it was hidden in a box. They would then walk into a different room, put the object down, pick up another one, rinse and repeat. At various points in the exercise, they stopped and asked people what was in their box or inventory. If they were asked right after going through the door, they were less likely to remember and slower to respond, whether they were in the real environment or the virtual one. So, what is going on? They called it the event model, which basically means that our memories work great until our brain decides the information it's holding on to isn't useful anymore. So another way to think about this is that it's bad timing, and whatever you've forgotten is the bit that your brain's decided is the least useful. So our brain will just mess with us all the damn time. Like it's it's just like, nah, that doesn't seem important. Don't worry about it. So if you're thinking about it, say picking up dog food, worrying about a presentation you've got at work tomorrow, wondering what you're going to make for dinner, and going to the kitchen for a cup of coffee, your brain is likely to shove that cup of coffee right off your mental radar. And when you change your physical environment at the same time, your mental one is changing gears. And sometimes those gears slip. You drop things, but don't worry, it wasn't an important thing. So,
it's
yeah.
good to know. Like,
Yeah.
as I'm, like, we're not old at all, Kate, but
No.
like, there's a shift in your capabilities when you
Correct.
get to like your mid-30s, and once you get into your 40s, as with every part of
Definitely.
age.
Actually,
but I'm not as sharp as I used to be. And there's sometimes where I go,
oh God,
Dominic in the future is going to really struggle to remember this. So
Yeah.
I'm going to do some exercises
That's
to
it.
put this in my head.
But it's also why, when you walk back into the room where you had the initial thought of what you were going to go and get, then your brain will help you out again and bring it back up to the list, because it's the situational awareness of what's going on. So try that if you don't already. Just go back to where you were when you thought of the thing, and it should come to you. Speaking of being old, I was just looking at my story and the font is currently set at 11. And I was like, this definitely needs to be a 13, 14 situation. I think I'm beyond 11. I'm reading it, but I'm like, oh, God, I think it's time. I need to see the optometrist.
Okay, I pay that. But what I thought you were referring to was your Facebook or your Instagram story of me singing at Club Retro and flashing everyone in your friends list and going, oh, that's an age thing too. Just put that away.
No, I definitely don't take that as an age thing. That's just a Dom thing. It's different. It was exquisite. I loved our night out. Dom and I went out and partied on the weekend, everyone. And Dom and I haven't partied very often, frequently, which I find very surprising because we are a blast in a glass. So we need to be doing it much more often. Actually, do you know what? Based on my behavior when I got home, I don't know that we maybe should.
We should.
I managed to get home, and I decided that I needed to get in my house and have a padlock on my back gate, very safety conscious. For the life of me, I could not wrestle with that padlock. I couldn't tell you why, but I don't think cognitively I was 100% lucid. Something was going on in my brain. I must have walked through a doorway or something, multiple doorways, and I could not figure out my padlock. So I thought, do you know what? Why bother with a padlock on a gate when I can just yeet my handbag over the fence and climb it?
Oh, God. As long as
you didn't fall. No, I didn't fall, but I have got a bruise that is forming on my inner leg from straddling my fence, which is it's a bit of a doozy. And then turns out I didn't collect all of the items from my garden, because last night when I was going to do a bit of a tidy up, I found my house keys and my driver's license just in the rocks of my garden. But I found everything, I think. That's good. All right. This it's enough about our weekend. It's share time. All right. The next weird thing I want to talk to you about our brain does is called decaying directional awareness. Now, have you ever heard those stories about those morons? That's a bit strong language. I didn't write that. They're so busy following their GPS that they drive right off a cliff or into a lake. Have you ever heard stories of this? Yeah,
of course.
They, or is that, something, is it something else other than them just natural selection? It's just part of natural selection.
Darwin Awards.
Our dependence on navigation systems and the resulting accidents is something called death by GPS, even if no one actually dies. It turns out that we as a society have become so reliant on GPS technology that our naturally occurring directional systems are withering away to nothing. We've long known that we have parts of the brain solely dedicated to directions, with the best proof of that coming from London's black cab drivers. Getting a cab license requires memorizing 25,000 different streets and countless landmarks, points of interest, and kebab shops along the way. Brain scans of active drivers show that all cabbies' grey matter expands to deal with the sheer volume of information and decreases back to normal levels when they retire. The last part of what's happening to our brains when we become dependent on our GPS, but we don't have the head start London cabbies do, it's mental mapping. Okay. And there's a whole new generation of drivers that don't have to think about things like associating landmarks with their drive to work or finding shortcuts on their own. When GPS dependent drivers were tested on their environmental awareness, they failed so miserably that some couldn't even recognize a street in the opposite direction that they had just driven down several times. In short, GPS is great, but depend on it too much, and depend on too much. Holy shit! In short, GPS is great, but depend too much on one, and your sense of direction atrophies.
Mm. I find this so fascinating because
Same.
Kane gives me grief all the time because I'm one that puts on my like my Google Maps every time I get into the car.
Yeah.
Not because I'm necessarily lazy, though there are those moments, but more so because I trust that this app would get me there quicker than what even my brain. Like I know
Yes.
all the side streets, I know all the potential ways to get there, but there could be something environmental, situational that I'm not aware of because I don't have visibility of it. So I'm just going to trust that an app has factored that in.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he gives me grief and it's just like, you need to not be so reliant on it because it's actually going to like
Atrophy
hinder
your
your.
brain.
And now, oh, fuck,
It's
he's going to.
scientifically
He's
proven.
gonna
I'm
love
sorry.
this.
You're welcome, Kane, but I'm sorry, Dom. I usually put it on. So even in the morning on my way to work, I will just put it on so that I can get traffic updates. So it tells me how long or what time I'll arrive at work. So that just in case, I'm just like, okay, it gives me a bit of a rough idea of what time I'll arrive at work, even though my travel time to work is the same every day. And I've been doing it now for 3 months. But I usually do the same. I usually have it on just more so to check the times of things. But
Mm.
I'm now I'm going to think about that a little more. I'm like, no, I don't want my directional awareness to atrophy. I feel I have a really good understanding and a good directional capacity for Victorian roads. So yeah,
It's very much like Kate and I are from a generation where in Australia we had what was called Melways, or in the state of
yes,
Victoria, it was
yep,
a massive, massive book of all the roads and streets in the whole entire state. Well, yeah.
pretty much, yeah,
And if you ever went anywhere, you would always need a Melways to find out where you're going, and you'd
yep,
have to follow it through pages and pages and pages and grids and things. And it taught kids to read maps because
correct,
obviously their parents couldn't be doing it. So you used to tell your parents how to get to where you're going
yep,
because you couldn't drive.
yeah,
And every invitation to school, like if your friend was having a birthday party,
yep,
every invitation always had a Melways reference
correct,
attached
yeah,
to the party information,
yep.
which I just find that's so
It's
retro.
so funny, isn't it? That's so retro. And it was always, and with that too, you still needed directional awareness because you'd be looking for landmarks and roads and things like that. So you'd be moving along, like, Burwood Highway, for example, and it was like, okay, cool. When I get to Springvale Road, I need to turn left. And it was very much helping with that directional awareness. But now GPS is you just follow your little screen and just plot along and see what happens. So there
Oh
you go,
well,
folks. If you don't want to have your directional awareness atrophied, then don't use the GPS quite as much when you don't have to.
put your ways away.
Oh, that was very good. Well done. The next phenomena I want to talk to you about is semantic satiation.
Oh, that's a sexy little.
Let's try a little experiment, Dominic.
Okay.
And you don't even have to get out of your chair, folks at home. If you're walking around, if you're listening to this in your car, whatever you want, I would like for you just to say the word dog over and over. Dog,
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 dog, dog,
dog,
dog,
dog.
dog, dog, dog,
I mean,
dog.
for the sake of a podcast where you don't want to listen to us say dog for 20 minutes, if you keep doing it and you do it enough, the word starts to sound funny. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that not necessarily in this case, but there's certainly lots of different. I mean, even shows. I remember a scene from Friends. I think they were saying cupcake or something like that. And it started to sound funny. And they were like, is that right? Cupcake? Now you start to wonder whether or not it's even a word. What does it mean? Is it spelt right? What's a dog? What's happening? It is called semantic satiation, and it happens when we see or hear the same word repeated over and over again. For around a century now, psychologists have known about the phenomena, and it's pretty straightforward. When we hear or see something enough times, our brain gets bored and presumably just wanders off to play with something else. So we don't just stop paying attention to it, we also stop assigning any particular meaning to the word. So it's the same thing that's happening if you spend all day in a coffee shop. By the end of the day, you don't smell coffee anymore because your brain's bored of it.
Wow.
How
So
wild are brains? They're just like, oh, that's boring now. I said dog 50 times. Bleh. I'm going to think about something else.
what I would like to know is why that doesn't apply or how that's different for things like addiction, like chocolate. If I say chocolate or eat chocolate all day, every
Uh huh.
day for an entire day, do you think my brain would get bored of it? I guess it's other
I
parts of the
think,
body that's
yeah. I also feel as though something like that, where it has particular chemicals that impact your brain, it's the chemicals that are driving that rather than the actual
just
sort
the
of thing
word,
itself. Yeah, getting
the
sick of
thought.
something or yeah, exactly. But
Wouldn't that
again,
be great?
it would be great. I'm not a doctor, but yeah, I'd say it's potentially something to do with the chemicals that are going into the brain rather than the thought that your brain's becoming bored with it. Okay, the next one, I find every single one of these so exciting and so fascinating. The next one I have for you, and I have suffered this many a time in my life, is the paradox of choice. Now, not only is your brain fickle, but it is sabotaging you and making you miserable. No worries, everyone. That is the theory. Now, it's a theory behind Barry Schwartz's paradox of choice, but it does make a lot of sense. Now, the basic idea is that every day our modern world presents us with an overwhelming number of choices. We call it freedom, but it's really presenting us with a sort of crippling indecision even after we make a choice. Our brains compare our choices to the ones that others make. And because brains are cruel, they're always focused on the choices that we think turned out better. We second guess everything from our career choices to decisions at the grocery store and every single thing in between. That is a huge amount of information to process. And that means that we are as overwhelmed by the things that we don't do as much as we are overwhelmed by the things that we do. Now, Schwartz says that a lot of the time it's this freedom that results in us not doing anything at all. Freedom coupled with high standards that seem to only get worse and worse with the shiny selective view of reality via social media paralyzes us into never deciding which friend to hang out with, which movie to go to, which restaurant to eat at, etc., etc. It is everywhere and it overloads our brains and it gives us less freedom at the end of the day. So then we just stay at home on the couch where we are faced with the choices of what's on Netflix.
This is giving me such Matrix vibes. It's like, do we ultimately have choice or do we not have choice at all?
Yes.
And just the way that you spoke about that was just reminded me so much of that. And I definitely can have moments where I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, the responsibility of choosing
Yep.
is too much.
It's exhausting.
And you think about it, there are people out there that love voluntarily giving their freedom away
Mm-hmm.
so they don't have that pressure and stress of choice and
Correct.
happily to have someone just decide for them.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, even down to something as simple as if you go, I mean, I guess probably happens a lot with us, Dom, in terms of our family. But if I go to your mum's house or you come to my mum's house or we go to our respective mothers' homes and they're like, I've made dinner, here it is. And they put it in front of you, go, thank God, because I could not even fathom what I was going to eat today. And you have just put a meal in front of me and you have taken away all of that sense of what I needed to eat. So thank you. And it's that comfort thing. It's where someone else takes the pressure off you and you don't have to worry about that particular thing because you're already thinking about a billion other things. So choice of dinner,
Being
fantastic.
taken care of. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. But it's also understanding why people suffer from anxiety and depression and, plethora of other disorders that we struggle with because, yeah, our brains are fucking with us. They're like,
Cheeky
you
bastard.
guys can do anything you want. And I was liken this to school. When I was in school, I used to love subjects where it's like very, you know, cool. You can pick, and here's 3 things you can pick from. So I'll be like, great, thank you very much. I'm going to take option B and I'm going to go ahead and do that and put all of my effort into it. Whenever I was in English or something, and they would say, you can do a creative writing piece about whatever you want. It was the worst piece of shit I've ever put on a piece of paper. So give me some choice because otherwise it's too much and your brain will sabotage your efforts in doing it.
We talk about that a lot in like from that my artistic background and time when it was you'd get into a studio and they're like, here's a blank canvas, and there's nothing scarier to an artist than a blank canvas.
Uh-huh.
You'd think that should excite them and they've got all this opportunity to create anything. But in fact, if you give an artist just a blank canvas and no prompt, no nothing, no stimuli, nothing,
Yep.
it's the fear of a blank canvas. I think there's even some like I'm sure there's some conceptual artists that have done whole fucking series of the horror of a blank canvas.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
too much choice.
Too much choice. All right, here's another one that we've all suffered from. Earworms. Now, earworms are... No, not earworms, physical worms. They're songs that get stuck in our head, Dom. I saw your
Oh my
face just
gosh.
respond to that.
You're
And you're
giving
like,
me
what? Has everybody had an earworm? What the hell?
it's like that Star Trek Wrath of Khan movie where those fucking things get in their
Oh,
ear and
yeah.
they mind control them and it's
Oh,
like
no. This is
traumatizing.
earworms in the sense of a song that gets stuck in your head. Now,
Okay.
everyone seems to have their own songs that they are vulnerable to. A Goldsmiths University study asked people what they usually found getting stuck in their head and wound up with around 5,000 songs. Earworms happen for a surprisingly complicated reason, and part of it has to do with repetition. So, how many times did you hear "Hey Macarena" playing on the radio in your head, right? So that would get stuck in your head. But it is more than just that. As songs are one of the few things that are absolutely identical every time you hear them, that gives you no question about what the melody or the lyric is that comes next, which allows your brain to run away with the song and continue to play it until you wonder if gouging out your eardrums with a spoon will help. It also has something to do with part of our short term memory called our slave system. That's the part that stores information that we need to concentrate on right now, like a phone number or what we're ordering when the waiter comes back. A song's familiarity, repetition, and catchy lyrics trick that part of our brain into thinking that it is really important that we figure out what the fox is saying right now, even though we don't really care.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it can take virtually any sort of exposure or completely unrelated stimuli to get that mental music playing, which is why we also can't resist telling you about our pocket full of sunshine. Dom, do you have an earworm? Because mine is playing in my head right now that we're talking about this, and it is the same song every gosh darn time. Do you have an earworm song that gets stuck in your head
I was just trying to
regularly?
I really struggle to recall songs while people are talking or if
Mm-hmm.
they're playing another song.
Yep.
There was a couple that I used to sing when I was a child, and now they're fully escaping me.
Mm-hmm. Mine is "We Go Together" from Greece. And
Yeah, that's a
that,
good one.
just even those bars will just replay in my head a lot. But at least it's a happy song.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
pretty good, but
gets me going.
it's very like
It's
the
an earwormy.
circusy song. Like
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right.
it's in there. It really gets you going.
Okay, now talking about common things that people have experienced, here is some info about deja vu.
You
Now,
are my sunshine, my
there we
only
go.
sunshine.
Oh.
I sing that to people constantly.
I'm just
Anyway.
going to get through the next part of the Grease song because it's still "We Go Together like wap bamboo bamboo." Write in, let us know what your earworms are, folks, or whether or not you were singing "You Are My Sunshine" or "We Go Together" from Grease after you listen to this episode. So, deja vu. You are familiar with deja vu. It's the feeling that you've experienced something before, very matrixy. Also,
So cool.
So cool. For years, we haven't had a clue about what's going on during these unsettling episodes until now. Sadly, it's not a past life experience that is poking in our consciousness. It is our brain resolving conflict in information. Now, it was in 2016, in July, that a team at the University of St Andrews in the UK presented their findings on the subject. They suggested that deja vu, the feeling that you've experienced something before, happens in the front part of the brain and it's triggered when we think we've experienced something that we haven't. The team triggered the feeling by giving volunteers lists of words like dream, night, and bed, and then asking them if they had seen a word that started with S. Sleep wasn't on the list, but it was familiar enough to what they've been thinking about that it seemed like it should have been on that list. So basically, when we feel deja vu, maybe what we're actually feeling is our brain re-accessing our memories to see how it can solve a conflict in information. If you've never experienced deja vu, then it might mean that your memory is better than average and you never have any errors to correct.
Oh, I like that.
How good.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't have deja vu very often, but I have had, and I can't. If you ask me what they were, I
Yeah,
couldn't
you can't
recall
describe them.
what they
No,
were,
it's just a
what
feeling.
what it was before, or
Uh
the
huh.
instance if it was a thing I saw or a word I said. But I have had in my lifetime like at least 4 to 5 examples of where I'm like, I've literally been right here and
Yep.
done exactly this.
Yep.
And they're very intense. It's never been wishy washy. It's either not at all or
Or
it's
it's
like,
full on.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you don't get it very often, or if you don't feel like you've ever experienced it, perhaps you just have a really good memory. So you don't have any conflicts in your mind that are trying to solve themselves.
Well, that's the question, Kate. Like, I would genuinely say I could count on my hand how many times
You've
I've
had experienced deja vu.
really experienced it.
Okay.
And how would you rate your sense of memory? Do you think you have a really good memory, or are
I think I
you?
have a pretty good memory, but I think I've experienced deja vu more than half a dozen times. I think it's been a lot more common.
Okay.
But yeah, but I don't know what that says. I feel like I have a good memory. So how
I would
bizarre.
I would love to play. That's one of those classic games, memory,
Yeah.
with the tiles. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Give me that. I love that game
And to
so
be
much.
honest, maybe we need to be doing more things like that. People playing brain games and doing all that because of our GPS atrophy. Maybe we're atrophying. That's not a word, is it?
It is now.
Atrophy. We're suffering from atrophy in other ways. Here's another one which goes directly to memory. Lethologica. Lethologica. Okay. Now this is all of us have been there, but you are trying to think of a word or a name that you know, but you can't come up with it. It's the thing that you're looking for, the what's it that you need for work, the guy in the movie. Now, what's going on when you forget a name or a word basically has to do with the way that we store information. When we're trying to think of something, like the guy from Inception, wasn't he in Jurassic Park as well? The guy, the name. Now, our memories tend to follow a series of pathways to get the words that we're looking for. Why are you touching your tongue?
Tip of the tongue.
Tip of the tongue.
I was doing it for like a whole minute. The video of this is going to be hilarious.
It looks so seedy. I love it. Tip of the tongue, correct. Lethologica, tip of the tongue. Now, our memories tend to follow a series of pathways to get to the words that we're looking for. Now, since there are a huge number of words in the English language, it makes sense that we use some more than others. Now, those pathways, they're clear, they're paved, they're well-traveled roads. Pathways to other words are overgrown, muddy, bug-infested roads that we have to machete our way through.
Okay. Talk about some metaphor,
All
some
right.
hyperbole.
Now, that takes a little bit of time. So the words at the end are part of what's called our passive vocabulary. And since we don't use them all the time, we file them away and forget where we left them. Proper names are one of the most commonly forgotten combos, which explains why every movie and television show that we watch has at least one of those guys I've seen before in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's lethologica, tip of the tongue.
I do like that. I think it's a personal challenge. I'm like, I can't rest until remember the word or the name
That's
or the
right.
whatever.
It's very frustrating. And
Yeah,
that's just because your brain's, trudging up those pathways that are all overgrown and they're getting eaten by bugs and stuff. And you're like, well, I have to get to the end of the pathway because this is
it's
driving me batty.
tripping over a few hundred bottles of wine.
Yeah. Now, this next strange, weird occurrence goes out to Jessica Taranto. It is misophonia. Now, misophonia is when the sound of someone chewing with their mouth open or chugging a can of beer makes you want to reach down their throat and rip out their intestines.
Yeah, sounds the worst.
Researchers are finally looking into why some sounds trigger serious rage hate in some people. The people who had misophonia knew that they were being irrational, not about chewing with your mouth open. Please don't do that. But they needed to develop their own sorts of coping methods to deal with the rage. The jury is still out on what's causing some people's misophonia, but early research has linked it to a very specific form of OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder.
Does not
Doesn't
shock
shock me at all.
me.
Does not surprise me. Now, other research seems to suggest that the brain of someone who can't stand the sound of markers on a whiteboard is working a little bit differently than most brains. There's likely a sort of hyperconnectivity between the person's auditory system and the limbic system. The latter is where our emotions come from. Limbic system is where your emotions come from, which suggests that you really honestly are feeling that murderous rage and that you're not just imagining it. Most recent research suggests misophonia doesn't just cause rage either. It can also pique emotions like sadness, anxiety, and disgust, among others.
Oh, I'm
Mm.
not surprised by disgust, but the other
Yeah.
ones are very interesting.
Yeah. I tend to go the tense kind of like anxiety for some sounds. Some sounds will really, drive me nuts. But yeah, I don't know. The chewing and stuff. Chewing I can deal with. The drinking, it
The
doesn't.
gulping.
Yeah, the gulping and watching someone woof, just makes me annoyed.
It's the chewing gum. If you chew gum with your mouth open,
Get away from me.
you, yeah, put
Yeah.
me in jail because I'm going to hurt you.
Okay. Another little titto bitto about your brain is motion sickness. Now, motion sickness, it can and will try to ruin anything. So it's more it's more than just a nuisance, especially if it means that your road trip ends up with you needing to get your car detailed. But that smell never goes away. And while it might not make it any better to know why it happens, at least you'll have something to talk about while you're waiting to get your car back. This article is so sassy. We don't completely understand what's going on that makes us turn a nice sort of blue-gray color on boats and in cars, but it may have something to do with the brain being unable to process conflicting information. You're sitting still, but your eyes and your ears are flying down the highway at 10 miles over the speed limit. It's likely that conflicting data screws up a person's sense of balance, which leads to motion sickness. There's another theory that suggests that it comes from your body's inability to predict how it has to move in order to maintain your center of balance to keep you from face planting. As to why some people get it and some don't, there's evidence for a genetic base for motion sickness. They may also be linked to migraines, as people that suffer from migraines are more likely to get motion sickness. Fortunately, and I know we're all hanging out for this, NASA is working on a way to combat the queasy feeling that some people are susceptible to. So hopefully, the teacup ride will no longer be quite so terrifying, because that's what NASA's for.
Interesting. I mean, I have gotten seasick sometimes. I
Yeah.
get bus sick if I'm up the back. It's more the swaying, like
Uh-huh.
it's the laggy sort of
Yep.
thing. If it's like jolty or whatever,
Yep.
that's fine. But I think it's the rolling sort of action that can set me off.
mess you up for sure. Now, Dom,
Now,
this
Kate,
next part of my story is not necessarily about funny things that the brain does to everyone, but funny things that have happened to certain people's brains. I have, based on the time of where we're at in this podcast, I have too many to share with you today. So this is a choose your own adventure. I'm going to give you some titles of the articles or stories that go with those titles. And the ones that we don't read, are the ones that we will, in fact, share with our Patreons, our
I was
Patreon
just about to
members.
say, is this
So,
part of Patreon time, or are
yes,
we?
it's Patreon time. So, I'm going to share with you, Dom, all of the headlines, and you can choose two of the stories. I believe we're going to have time for two stories, and the others will be available on our Patreon for our listeners. So,
Mhm.
would you like to hear about the man who stuck his head in a particle accelerator? Would you like to hear about the artist who is missing a piece of his brain? Would you like to hear about the man with almost no brain? Would you like to hear about the mentally ill man who cured himself with a gun? Would you like to hear the strange journey of Albert Einstein's brain? Or would you like to hear the cheery story of the woman who scratched through her skull?
Oh,
You get to choose two.
just two.
Just two.
Okay. I I really, really want to know about the scratching through the skull, but
Mm-hmm.
because I really want to know about it, I have a feeling that other people are going to want to know about it. So screw you folks. If you want to hear about that particular horror story, you're going to have
Yes.
to be a Patreon.
Bang. Suck it.
Um, Obviously, I'm going to go with the art one because I'm an artist.
I did pick that because of you. Yes. Yeah. The artist who was missing a piece of his brain. Okay. First one up. And
And I think Albert Einstein.
great. Great choices. Okay. Shall we start with the artist?
Yes.
Exquisite. Okay. John Sarkin, a 35-year-old chiropractor, was playing golf one day when something weird happened inside his head. One of his blood vessels started moving and eventually pressed against his auditory nerve, causing a deafening case of tinnitus or tinnitus, whatever people want to call it.
Tinnitus.
Hoping to cure the incessant buzzing, Sarkin underwent a strange type of surgery in 1989. His doctor separated the nerve and the capillary with a piece of Teflon, but unfortunately, the treatment caused a massive stroke. Now, when Sarkin woke up weeks later, he found that he was, in fact, missing a piece of his brain.
Oh, wow.
Due to the stroke, doctors had to cut a chunk from the left side of Sarkin's brain, causing a complete personality change. Suddenly, John had a burning desire to draw, an urge that completely consumed his life. When he returned to his chiropractic practice, he sketched random pictures between patients, doodling strange shapes, cacti, and odd faces. During dinner, he would stop eating to jot down ideas that were bubbling up in his brain. It turned out that John was experiencing a bizarre condition called sudden artistic output, which is so rare that doctors have only recorded 3 cases caused by brain injury.
Wow.
Mhm. Now,
That's so cool.
whilst this brain injury would make most starving artists green with envy, in 1993, Sarkin sold 8 of his pictures to the New Yorker. He quit his business and opened an art studio. Since then, John's work has appeared in the New York Times and the Boston Globe. His story was purchased by Tom Cruise's production company, and he was the subject of a book written by a Pulitzer Prize winning author. If you want to buy one of John's pieces, you'll have to shell out more than $10,000 per canvas. As far as stroke side effects go, this one is pretty profitable.
Wow, I love hearing stories like that where people wake up and they can play the piano, or they wake up and they speak a language, or
Yeah.
all of a sudden I don't know the quality of his art. I can't speak to it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But anyway, cool.
There you go.
Maybe I need to hack away at my brain, and maybe I'll start making some serious dosh on my art.
I would prefer you didn't.
Okay.
Again, not a doctor, so can't give you any proper advice on that. But I don't know that that's going to be a good strat moving
Okay.
forward.
I'll save it till I'm 80 or 90.
Okay, sounds
When
like a
it's all
plan.
over and done with.
Okay, Dom, you also chose on our Choose Your Own Adventure series The Strange Journey of Einstein's Brain.
Yeah, hit me up. I love this.
Albert Einstein was clearly a genius. Okay, we all agree on that. All
Yeah.
right. Now, many of us have wondered from time to time, how did his brain work? Pathologist Thomas Harvey wondered the same thing, and he decided to find out the answer. If he had to break a few rules along the way, then so be it. Now, before his death in 1955, Einstein stipulated that his remains were to be cremated. The last thing that he wanted was mobs of zealous students gathering around his tomb, murmuring E equals MC squared over and over again. The only way to keep this is really quite abrupt writing also. The only way to keep his corpse from becoming a holy relic was to burn it to a crisp. That meant, though, he also wanted his brain fried as well. However, Thomas Harvey didn't care. He claimed that he had permission of Princeton Hospital, which he did not, and he plucked out Einstein's brain during an autopsy. Needless to say that this was a big no-no. Please don't do that.
Yeah.
Now, in danger of losing his job, Harvey convinced Einstein's son to okay the operation, claiming that his dad's brain needed to be studied for science. Now, I can get on board with wanting to study someone's brain for science, particularly somebody of this capacity.
Absolutely.
However, that's not their wishes. He didn't want people wandering around and checking out his tomb and whatnot. So he wanted to be sizzled. So let him be sizzled if that's his wishes.
Let it go.
Mm-hmm.
Let it go.
Now, Harvey wasn't a neuroscientist and he didn't know what he was doing. So this is a really positive step. When hospital officials asked him to hand over the brain, he refused and he was fired. Fair enough. His next step was to drive to Philadelphia, where he found a technician to slice Einstein's brain into over 200 cubes.
Okay, that's not the way to study a brain.
I
just
wouldn't
gonna
think
point
so.
that out there. Like, try and put that back together.
That's right. Now, over the next 40 years, the little squares ended up in weird places. Harvey stored them in jars in his basement. Like, what a waste, and that's weird and creepy and odd. Now, they almost all of those met their destruction at the hands of Harvey's wife. Now, when Harvey moved to Kansas, he kept the bits in a box under a beer cooler. They were regularly admired by Naked Lunch author William Burroughs, and Harvey once accidentally left them at the house of Einstein's granddaughter, who wasn't too pleased. As for scientific study, that didn't exactly pan out. Harvey mailed pieces of the brain to various researchers, but most neurologists weren't keen on analyzing Einstein's brain. The few scientists that did show interest cranked out studies that were mostly inconclusive, derided, or discredited. Yeah. Disappointed, Harvey eventually returned the brain, or what was left of it, to Princeton Hospital, and Harvey died in 2007. Nobody tried to steal his brain.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
Like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Right? Absurd. So
Can
that...
I ask,
please.
Where was this dude from?
He was from... That's a great question. Pathologist that was somewhere in the States. No. He was working for... It doesn't say here.
Yeah,
on
I
what
feel
I've
like
got.
Whatever you say, I'm going to... Let's just pretend I don't know, and I'm just going to go, doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, where's Princeton? Princeton Hospital.
It's in the States.
Yeah. Yeah. So wherever that is, I think is where he was. Yeah.
Just fuck's sake.
Yeah. Well, those are our two choose your own adventure. What I will leave our regular listeners with is our pop culture reference of the week before we take care of some of our other stories on our Patreon.
Love it.
The Popo Culturano that I have chosen is James Bond's The World Is Not Enough.
Ooh.
1999 film release. It was the third of the Bond adventures. Yes, GoldenEye, Tomorrow Never Dies, The World Is Not Enough. Very good. The reason that I have chosen this is because the bad guy, who was played by Robert Carlyle, his name was Victor Zokas, but he was better known as Renard, the anarchist. Yeah. He was former KGB who turned terrorist. And then he was conspiring with another beautiful woman, Electra King, was trying to monopolize the world's oil market for profit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when Renard was going to be taken out by MI6, he got shot in the head. Now, rather than kill him, the bullet stayed in his head, and then it started to like remove different sensations, feelings, emotions. So, what was different about Victor is that he could not feel pain. Pain was not a receptive thing for him. So, Renard is the only James Bond villain who's defined and called an anarchist. Interesting fact.
Mm-hmm.
Renard's forename is the French word for fox. And in real life, if a person were to lose the ability to feel after a brain injury, they would end up being paralyzed and they would need a respirator to breathe.
Yeah.
I don't think quite as catchy a Bond villain as Renard turned out to be.
This is, I think, possibly the second or third time we have featured "The World Is Not Enough" as our pop culture
Yes,
reference.
we have, exactly, because it's got a bit of everything. And it's not a great Bond movie, to be perfectly honest. Particularly, yeah, I mean, Die Another Day is Brosnan's worst. We can all agree on that. GoldenEye, one of, if not the best Bond movie out there, in my personal opinion. But The World Is Not Enough. The bad guy, who we didn't talk so much about, who don't feel no pain, is Victor.
Yep. Wow.
What a guy. What a guy. So, Dom, that is the end of my regular episode about the brain. But if you are a Patreon member, or if you would like to listen to a little bit more of our story, you can jump on to our Patreon account, pay a couple of bucks, and you'll be able to hear all about the man who stuck his head into a particle accelerator. Fascinating. The man with almost no brain. What? What do you mean? Almost no brain? The mentally ill man who cured himself with a gun. How? Was there medicine in the gun? And also the woman who scratched through her skull. And yes, it is as terrifying, horrifying, awful, and gross as you might think.
Loving it, Kate. Thank you so much for teaching us so much about the brain. It was both interesting and a little bit creepy, but I think for those that love the extra creep, they really should just come and join us on Patreon.
Yeah, come and play.
Wrap it up there, folks. Please go check out our socials. Please go check out Horror Roulette from the BooPod Network and give us whatever star rating and review you think is appropriate, but we'll make it easy for you. It's just 5 stars.
5 stars. 5 stars, Dillies. 5 stars. Love your...
Week,
yes, what are you doing?
And next week, Kate, I'm going to do real life. So this is a story inspired by a pop culture phenomenon on the movie series Taken.
I have a very particular set of skills.
I'm going to share not one, but 2 real life Taken stories. And these stories you just will not fucking believe.
I cannot wait.
The most, and they are unsolved possibly still. So you have to come along and let's see if we can summit and man this and solve them for the world.
I will find you and I will kill you.
All right, folks. See you next week.
Bye. Love you.